of plastic. Sorry. Ask.
Now that I have your attention from that title, let's chat about Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada. Keep in mind there is a whole lot of tongue-in-cheek in some of what I say down below. Here we go. This is getting kind of old. Not the so-called threats, but the Canadian and overall leftist reaction to them. Let's look at three possibilities for annexation. 1. Direct military action. Not very likely, and I'll explain that below. Economic pressure. This is far more likely. And thirdly, a simple invitation with negotiations. Hey, Canadians, want to become a part of the United States? Let's negotiate. Let's do the last item first. If Canada takes better control of refugees with better vetting procedures, and we at least run a wholehearted operation to try and stop the flow of drugs, though far more come to America from Mexico than from Canada, although we do wind up with some going down there. This will not happen until we punt the Liberals. They are too deeply owned by Klaus Schwab, the WEF, and George Soros. Trump will drop the majority of tariffs as long as we do the same. Then, at some point, there will be an invitation to join the United States. The Trump presidency will issue an invitation to form one large economic union, to become a literal part of America, a state. As long as Congress, the Senate, and the American people approve. Though I think Canada becoming one large state would be very bad, at least for the United States. More on that later. Okay, let's take the second of those items now. Economic pressure. The Trump presidency begins putting more and greater economic pressure on Canada. The first step is what we are seeing. The simple demand to vet immigrants and refugees more carefully, as in all honesty, we really have sent a few terrorists their way. And while more illicit drugs flow from Mexico, Canada needs to at least make a reasonable attempt to quench the flow of drugs across the border. And not even just across the border, but within Canada itself. Face it, our idiot Prime Minister and idiot premiers did make it legal here. While neither is a huge amount, even a little is far too much. And even Canadians have been calling for this, but the WEF puppets at the helm of Canada use all the standard talking points, racism, misogyny, etc., in order to deflect from their failures and their own crimes. Gradually, Trump begins putting more and greater economic pressure via punitive tariffs on Canada, which causes great pain to the Canadian people. The current Liberal government doesn't really care. They've been imposing their own pain on us for 10 years, actually a lot longer than that. And if we do punt them in the near future, when they come back, they'll just go back to doing more of the same. And you can see the fact that they don't care by the fact that Trudeau is currently vacationing in Europe for proof of this. There's all of this going on between Canada and the United States, and what's he doing? Absolutely nothing but hiding. So the people begin putting greater and greater pressure on the government. Maybe we see another truckers' convoy? Eventually, an offer is made. Why don't you just become a part of America? Now, before I go any further into the next part, I wanted to make very clear that in no way, shape, or form am I denigrating either the Canadian or American militaries. The United States military is, if not the best military on earth, it certainly stands up in the top couple. And if I had to serve in any, if I were young enough, army, it would be the American Army. The Canadian Army is one of the finest and has been known over the world for most of the, say, past 100 or so years as one of the most aggressive on the battlefield. And we were really well equipped with modern equipment once upon a time that was the envy of some militaries. But right now, the American Army would likely shred our demoralized and grossly underfunded military. Some of our military have had to pay out of their own pockets for such niceties as, say, helmets, flak vests. Now imagine if the American Armed Forces had to do that, what kind of an uproar there would be. Well, our government sends dollars and equipment to Volodymyr Zelensky so the Ukraine can continue to throw spitballs at Putin, or sell them and pocket the cash, whatever it is he's doing with it. Onwards. So now we come to the first point that I mentioned: direct military invasion. This is not likely for the following reasons. Firstly, direct military intervention to take Canada would be an act of war and would require full approval from Congress. The President cannot unilaterally order an invasion, especially of a friendly nation. Next, the likelihood of Congress agreeing to this is pretty slim. I don't think there would be much belly for it, even among the most patriotic of Republicans and the most supportive of Donald Trump. Then, the United Nations would strongly condemn America. That doesn't mean much, a letter, a few people shouting in sessions. The crushing punitive financial actions of other nations would send even a powerhouse like the United States to its knees. Great Britain would supply weapons and ammo to Canada. After all, Canada does only have 3 days' supply of ammunition for its military, after all. They'd look at the situation, probably write a sternly worded letter to the American ambassador in London, and then perhaps after a cup of tea they might even send troops who would stop to assess the situation, have another cup of tea, then carry on. But never underestimate the British SAS. You really don't want to deal with them. They will kill while drinking their cup of tea, won't spill a drop as they walk over your body, and then quickly and quietly get the rest of you. Think about that one. Australia would likely offer troops and some moral support, but don't underestimate them either, if they ever do get involved. Every non-human creature in their country, so it seems, if it doesn't have the potential of killing and eating you, will at least hurt you. And face it, the Aussies willingly live amongst those creatures. China and Russia would sit back and quietly egg each side on, maybe even supply some weapons to Canada, in order to see if there are any pieces left to scavenge when the dust settles. While America is doing its thing, can there be no doubt that aggressor nations like China and Russia would take advantage of the distraction to do some of their own expansion, not to mention Iran, North Korea, and a few other nations? Consider this. Have Americans trained to fight in minus 58 or minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit? And how about those 10-foot snowdrifts? Have fun with that. We've trained heavily for it. We have no choice, after all. Our country freezes over for half the year. Think of the number of dead and wounded on each side. Do you really want that? Will the American people support that? For long, anyway. Now that that's out of the way, let's look at what you would get out of the deal. Nickel, iron ore, coal, oil. You already get most of your imported oil from us. Natural gas, uranium, lumber, poutine, maple syrup. Okay, what else would you get beyond our natural resources and really beautiful vacation spots? Oh, and some really irritating people. Think very, very carefully about the following points, and I mean really carefully. You would be taking on our national debt. It would become a part of yours. This would add an additional, at the moment, approximately $1.2 trillion, yes, that's trillion, to your own national debt. You would add approximately 41 million people, at the moment, to your own population, all of whom would no longer have valid health care, since we would lose our so-called free coverage, which ain't really free for you twits who think it is. We pay exorbitant taxes to pay for it, and it's not the best care in the world. A large number of Canadians are real assholes. Sorry, but we just are. Hypocritical, overly nice, at least to your face. Which brings me to my next point. You really don't want Canada to be one big state. Trust me, you just don't. Why? Because of the above-mentioned assholes, that's why. Let me explain. No, that is too much. Let me sum up. I would take Canada and make the provinces and territories into individual states. But I would call up France and say, hey, get over here and take Montreal, Quebec City, would you? Oh, and while you're at it, take the 905. The 905 is how we refer to Greater Toronto during elections, named for its area code, 905. It has a lot of seats, and they inevitably go left. Thanks, France. Please take them now. Then reduce the number of elected officials in urban areas, especially in Vancouver and the area surrounding it. They've disenfranchised us urbanites forever. Why? Because if you keep Montreal, Quebec City, and the 905 and Canada as one big state and don't reduce the number of urban reps, America would never, ever have another Republican government again. These liberals in those areas are why, out of the last approximately 125 years, Canada has had liberal governments for approximately 95 of that 125 years, and why our country is so screwed up politically and socially. William Lyon Mackenzie King, for example, was Prime Minister of Canada for 22 years of that 95-year span, and he was avidly liberal, as in party, and left-leaning in his beliefs, and a bit of a simple moron. At least that's my belief. But for Canadians, what would we gain? A decent and functional constitution, if it was actually followed. The Second Amendment. Hey, I would be real happy with that one. Elected judges in some areas. An actual elected Senate. Canada's Senate is not elected or effective. The ability to impeach officials, including the president, vice president, and judges. $1 worth more, so more buying power, maybe. Better income taxes. Badly made cups of tea. America, if you do pull Canada into the United States, please learn to make a bloody proper cup of tea, would ya? Let's take just one more trip down what America would get out of Canada besides poutine and maple syrup. Bearing in mind that I am no constitutional scholar. Set out in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the Constitution. No person, except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution, shall be eligible to the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. A quick word on that natural-born part. There's quite a lot of argument within the United States and the court system particularly about what constitutes a natural-born citizen. It is pretty much decided, but let's carry on. Let's look at a couple of former candidates for president, or who attempted at least a primary campaign to run as president. Senator Barry Goldwater. Election campaign of 1964. Place of birth, Phoenix, in the then Territory of Arizona. George Romney, yes, Mitt Romney's father. The campaign of 1968. Place of birth, Colonia, Dublin, Chihuahua, Mexico. Senator Ted Cruz, the 2016 campaign. Place of birth, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Notice something about all of these? Technically, none was born inside the United States, and even Goldwater's birth didn't count as inside the United States, as Arizona was not a state at the time, it was a territory. But they qualified anyway. How? Arizona became a state in 1912. Colonia, Dublin, was in Mexico, and Calgary, well, it's a city, quite a large one actually, in Canada. And unfortunately, its politics lean left. It's a ticklish issue, but to oversimplify, as far as is concerned, to be a natural-born American citizen, you either have to be born within the territorial United States to American parents, or to parents at least one of which was an American citizen at the time of your birth, and that qualifies even outside the United States. So, if you are an American working in, say, Canada, such as Cruz's parents, your child would be considered American, a natural-born one. This covers all three of the above. So now, let's assume that the United States does absorb or annex Canada. By some stretch, we are now all considered natural-born American citizens, maybe through a court case or what have you. As in Goldwater's case, shouldn't we, after all, since those of us born in Canada were pulled in? Let's run with that. Bearing all the above in mind, that should mean, as Americans, not by choice after all, we should be eligible to run for president. Trudeau Carney and William Lyon Mackenzie King are the kind of dorks this country raises to office on many occasions. There are plenty of good ones that come to office. After all, currently we have Pierre Poilievre, who is leader of the Progressive Conservative Party. At the very least, even if those of us who were here when Canada is annexed were to be found ineligible, those born after annexation would certainly be eligible, and you'd get one of our dorks as president sooner or later. You just would. Dear America, seeing our politics, honestly, do you really, really want a President Justin Trudeau, or a President Pierre Elliott Trudeau, or maybe a President Mark Carney, or worse, a President Freeland? Do you? No? Didn't think so. Be satisfied just coming for a visit, and we'll gladly sell you poutine, maple syrup, lumber, pretty much anything else we have that you want. My last poke is to Canadians. I say, grow up already. Trump is doing what Trump does and does well, angling for a deal. He doesn't want Canada. He doesn't want Canadians because of our behavior and our attitudes. He just wants a deal, no matter what is being said by anybody, including by Trump representatives. Give it a rest.